Okay, this is another video in the series about the flat pulley assembly. I'm going to create another new part and I'm going to save that as the base part. So I'm going to use the snipping tool again to copy across the basic dimensions of the part, copy and paste into my working area. And I think the most convenient view for modeling the base will be this plan view here. So I'm going to create a sketch on the top plane and I'm going to draw this view down here. So I'll create a rectangle, and then within that I can create another rectangle as well. Now you may notice when I go to put in this rectangle here, the little yellow icon, it's going to make it the bottom line of this rectangle coincident with the bottom line of this one. So that means that as I move this rectangle around, it's constrained that the top line is going to be coincident with the top line of the wider rectangle. But it's still free to move left and right. Now what I also want to do is I want to look at the design intent of this part here. It should be symmetrical about the center line here, and the boss sticking up off the top surface should be 50 millimeters wide, and it should be symmetrical about the center of the overall base. So I'm going to put in a center line from the midpoint of this to the midpoint of the bottom. It should snap automatically to the midpoint, but if not, you can, well, if not, we can put in a center line, and we can either select, or you can right click and go select midpoint, control click, and make that line coincident with the midpoint of the larger rectangle. Okay, so there are multiple ways of going about doing that. So whatever way you do it, you should wind up with a center line on the overall base that is coincident with the midpoint of the base. Hopefully that makes sense. So this center line is now in the middle of the larger rectangle. The smaller rectangle is still free to move left and right. So what I want to do is to make this smaller rectangle symmetrical about that center line. So I can click on one line, control click on another line, and control click on the center line and add in a symmetric relation. So now that rectangle is still free to move, but it'll remain centered on that center line, and the center line will remain centered on the larger rectangle. Okay, so I can add in some of my dimensions now. So right mouse button and up, and I'm going to put in the overall length of the base is 110. The overall height of the base is 60, and the width of the boss sticking up from the top is 50. Okay, and that sketch, now I'm going to use that sketch to create this profile here. I'm going to leave the holes to create them in a separate feature, and I'll leave the fillets as well to create in a separate feature. So I'm going to take this sketch. Now this sketch has multiple contours or multiple enclosed areas in it, but I can extrude those in separate features from one sketch. So I'll highlight that sketch. I'm going to create an extruded boss base feature, and because it's got multiple areas in it, I have to specify in the extrude tool which contours I want to extrude. So with the selected contours here, I can select multiple areas to extrude, and I'm going to extrude all of those up by a height of 10 to create the base, and then separately in another feature I'll use the same sketch to extrude this boss off the top of it here. So I'm going from the sketch plane, I'm extruding blind in one particular direction by height of 10 millimeters, and I'm extruding all 4 of those areas. So we get just that flat rectangular base. Now I can use sketch 1 again to create a separate feature from the same sketch. So I'm going to create another extruded feature based on sketch 1. This time, however, I just want to highlight the smaller rectangle. Now I could take that smaller rectangle and extrude it up by 15 millimeters, and it would give me the correct geometry, but notice on the sketch here that I want to have a dimension of 5 millimeters referenced from the top surface of the base. So what I'm going to do when extruding this is, rather than extruding it from the sketch plane or from the bottom of the base, I want to extrude it from a different plane. I want to extrude it from the top surface. So change the starting condition from sketch plane, change it to extrude from a surface or face or plane. So I'm going to select the top surface here. So I'm going to say take that smaller rectangle and extrude it from the top surface by a specified height. So I'm going to extrude it in direction 1, which is up, blind by a distance of 5 millimeters. Merge the result, and yeah, and the contours that I'm extruding are these 2 areas. And OK that. So that's the solid parts. Next I'm going to add in the holes, the 4 holes here, and the last thing I'll do then is I'll use the fillet tool to round off the corners. So I want to create 4 holes here. I could use the extruded cut feature to just draw 4 circles and extrude cut those. Quite often though, when creating holes, you'll want to use the hole wizard, so I might just demo that here. You would have to use the hole wizard if you wanted to do anything other than just a plain round hole. So if you wanted any countersinks, any counter bore, threaded holes, anything like that, or a blind hole that didn't go all the way through. So I'll use the hole wizard here. So there are 2 parts to the hole wizard. There's what type of hole you want to create, and then the position of the hole. So where you sketch the center of the holes, the positions of them. So the type of hole you can select from counterbored, countersunk, threaded holes, tapered tap, and there's various other options or types of hole. And then also you can select whether you want them in inch standard or metric, or so that would be American metric. This is the ISO is what we're looking for. So we want the type of hole, first of all, we want is just a plain through hole. So select just hole. We want it in ISO and drill sizes. So we want a diameter 8 hole. The end condition, then you can specify whether you want a blind hole or a through hole. We want a through hole in this case. We don't want any countersink on it, but you can specify a near side or a far side countersink if you need. So we don't want any countersink in this case. So position, then we're going to specify that we want to draw on this plane here. Now you could flip it over and sketch on the bottom, you should get the same result. I'm going to specify the top surface here. Now when you're specifying the position of the hole, it basically opens up the sketch tools that you'd be familiar with from creating sketches. But the difference is here, it's just going to place diameter 8 circles, or really what it's doing is placing the center point of those diameter 8 holes that we've specified. So I'm going to specify 4 holes here. And I'll just go space bar and normal 2 just to look in straight at that. And we're going to use the Smart Dimension tool then and center lines and relations to position these 4 holes that they are symmetric about the center of the part and that they're 20 millimeters away from this corner, from the corner of the top boss. So right mouse button up for the Smart Dimension tool, and I want to dimension from this line to the center of that circle to be 20. And I will also, I'll create a center line here along the middle of the part, from midpoint to midpoint, and I'm going to specify that this hole is symmetric with this one. So click, control click, and I want and control click the center line, and then make those symmetric. So that means now that both of those holes will be symmetric about that midpoint, but we don't have a center to center distance yet. So I'll go Smart Dimension and make these two 40 millimeters center to center. Okay. So those 2 holes are now fully defined. I can do the same thing the far side then. So I can make them symmetric about that center line, and then use Smart Dimension, say 20 from the boss, and 20 from the boss, and then a center to center distance of 40 millimeters. And that now is fully defined. Okay. Now the way that the hole tool creates those holes is slightly different to a cut extrude. What it actually does is, you'll see here a little sketch, a rectangular sketch. So what it actually does is it sketches the profile of a hole and then revolves it. So it does a revolved cut. So that way, if you specify a countersink, what it actually does is it'll sketch a little angle here and revolve that around to create a countersink or a counter bore or something like that. Okay, so that's almost finished now. The last feature we need to create is the fillets on all 4 corners here. So in the Features tab, we can go to the Fillet tool. We want to specify a constant size fillet with radius 10, and the items to fillet, then click in the blue box, the items to fillet, we want to select the corners, all 4 corners. Now there are some tools here that will allow you to select multiple edges at the same time, depending on what you need to do. Sometimes it's easier to just manually select, but in this case here there is a loop, what's called a loop. So if you click on this second one here, it will highlight all 4 of the corners that are located in a loop around this rectangle. I'll just turn on the preview there just so you can see it clear. So when I selected this one and I select the loop, it selects all 4 of the corners that are going around this rectangle here. As I say, sometimes it's more convenient to just manually select the ones you want. So that is all 4 of those corners selected, so we can click OK on that, and that is the part finished then. And it should be set up in such a way that even if we come along and change a dimension to say 150 millimeters and rebuild, then everything should stay centered and the holes should still remain 20 away from that corner. And also if we change this height here to 80 for example and rebuild, everything still stays centered and where we want it. So just undo those changes, and that's the finished part. Okay, I'll finish the video at that there and leave it at that. So I'll save my part and leave it at that.